Thank you, Dan. Well, I want to welcome everyone to the February 24th, 2021 meeting of the Planning Commission of the City of Edina. We're conducting it remotely as we're all used to these days. Hopefully soon we could all meet in person again. So tonight's meeting is being presented live on cable TV or edinamin.gov live meetings and facebook.com edinamin. There'll be an opportunity for public comment on our public hearing matters. We have two public hearings that will be coming up in a little bit with a conditional use permit, and we have a variance request, and there'll be an opportunity for public comment. I want to thank everyone for participating. I also want to give a little heads up to people who participate time to time. One thing I've noticed that we would make people aware of is when we have these meetings by Zoom, to comply with law, we have to have roll votes instead of just all in favor, say aye, or say all opposed, say nay. So if you participate in these meetings only tonight or occasionally, just be aware that we're going to have a lot of roll votes, and that's just how we have to do to officially record how we voted in our meeting. And with that, thank you everyone for joining us. I'd like to turn the meeting over to Liz Olson of the city staff to do a roll call.
Thank you, Chair Nemrov. Commissioner Cullen? Here. Commissioner Strauss?
Here.
Commissioner Agnew?
Here.
Commissioner Berube?
Here.
Commissioner Olson?
Here.
Commissioner Miranda?
Here.
Chair Nemrov?
Here. Thank you. And the next item on our agenda is to approve our agenda. I'll ask staff, are there any changes to the agenda we should be aware of?
No changes from staff.
Okay, unless someone on the commission has a change, could I get a motion to approve?
I move to approve the agenda.
I second.
Ms. Olson, could you do a roll vote, please?
Commissioner Strauss?
Aye.
Commissioner Agnew?
Aye.
Commissioner Berube?
Aye.
Commissioner Olson?
Aye.
Commissioner Miranda?
Aye.
Chair Nemrov?
Aye. The next, after approving tonight's agenda, the next item is to approve the minutes for our last meeting. They were included in the packet that was distributed publicly on Friday. And so I'd ask if anyone has any questions or comments. In the absence of questions or comments, I ask if anyone would be interested in making a motion to approve.
I move to approve the minutes from the last meeting.
Second.
Ms. Olson, could you do a roll vote for that?
Commissioner Strauss?
Aye.
Commissioner Agnew?
Aye.
Commissioner Berube?
Aye.
Commissioner Olson?
Aye.
Commissioner Miranda?
Aye.
Chair Nemrov?
Aye. And that takes us to 7:04, and we can start the public hearing portion of our meeting. We have two public hearings tonight. The first one is a conditional use permit with the variance for Shepherd of the Hills Lutheran Church located at 500 Blake Road South. And presenting on behalf of the city is Chris Ocker, Assistant Planner. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, members of the Planning Commission, this is a public hearing for a conditional use permit with a 5.41-foot setback variance for parking resurface improvements and an entrance canopy for Shepherd of the Hills Church at 500 Blake Road. Subject property is located south of Maloney Avenue and just west of Blake Road South. It consists of a church and a main parking lot just south of the church. It also has a parking area to the west, and they own the single-family home directly west of the church. They also own a lot to the south of the church. The church has submitted a phased plan for improvements to the parking areas. This is an existing survey of the property as it exists currently. And then these are the improvements. It's It's basically a resurfacing of the existing lots that's currently there. There are a few improvements that are proposed to increase and improve the circulation of the lot. There are no improvements to the building proposed, with the exception of a drive-through canopy on the south side of the building right next to the doorway. So there's no programming changes. They're not changing the seating capacity within the church. So the number of parking stalls hasn't changed. They meet the parking requirements currently. They're overparked by about 17 or 18 stalls. The parking lot is in very poor shape, and they'd like to resurface it and do some improvements on it. The total will only be a one stall addition to what's currently there, so they're not doing the improvements to increase the parking, but they also don't want to reduce the parking, because when they have large events, weddings, funerals, they don't want to force any of that parking out into the residential areas. So to accommodate the application, it is required for a conditional permit for an existing religious institution, including their parking areas. They are also requesting a variance to bring the parking area along the middle lot closer to the south lot line. It's currently not parallel to that south lot line, and it's not conforming currently. I'd like to get a little bit closer so that they can have standardized drive aisles and parking depths that meets our current requirements. So the property has been occupied by Shepherd of the Hills Church since 1957. It will continue to operate as a church. They don't have, again, any program changes. They do plan on formalizing the parking areas. They'll have this drop-off area with the new canopy. Part of the plan is to connect some of these parking areas and to make the circulation a little bit better. So you'll see that currently there's a connection to the street to the north, Maloney Avenue. That will be removed. So they'll be removing a curb cut or drive aisle connection to the street, and they will be connecting that parking area to a current drive aisle inside the church property. They'll also be adding this canopy along the south side, which will match all of the materials that are currently on the building. And then along the south lot, currently there's a sidewalk that connects these two parking lots. They'll put in a drive aisle so that you don't have to drive out onto Lake to get back into another parking area. So the applicant is asking to extend the boundary of the main parking lot, which is just south of the lot, to be between 2 and 3 feet closer to the south lot line. And that's so that right now the parking depths and the drive aisles are not standard. They don't meet our current codes, and they'd like to make sure that all of the parking areas do meet the code when they are restriped. The parking lot curb line and the property line are not parallel, which results in a setback dimension that varies. The current setback is between 10 feet to 7 feet 6 inches. The minimum setback is 10 feet, so they're currently non-conforming in some locations. And that would be reduced to 7 feet 8 inches on the east end to 4 feet 5 inches on the west end. By increasing the setback, the church has stated will relieve the site of the practical difficulties of non-conforming drive aisles and parking lot size. They'll be able to accomplish the 60-degree parking aisle of 18 feet and then 18 by 9 foot parking stall. So in terms of the primary issues, does it meet the conditional use permit requirements? The requirements of a conditional use permit, it should not have any undue adverse impact on government facilities, utilities, or services, and that it will not generate traffic with the capacity of the street serving the properties. and that it does not have an undue adverse impact on public health, safety, or welfare, and it will not impede the normal or orderly development or improvement of other property, and that it conforms to the applicable restrictions and special conditions of the district in which it is located, and that it's consistent with the comprehensive plan. So the changes are really not going to affect the criteria for a conditional use permit. In terms of the variance, is the variance justified? The Shepherd of the Hills Church and the associated parking currently have non-conforming setbacks on the site with the previous setbacks obtained and approved in years past. The proposed setback variance will allow the parking to be more code compliant, increase interior circulation with one less driveway connection to the street, which is Maloney, which is certainly something that the city would like to achieve, less connections to the street. The southeast and west lots will be designed to tie in with the existing parking areas, more appropriately improving interior circulation. And the existing parking lot layout building allow for the proposed improvements to be possible in just a few locations. I mean, they're just asking to make some minor adjustments in order to make the interior improvements in circulation. The proposed variances will not alter the essential character of the neighborhoods. They're actually going to be improving by putting in landscaping and screening along those areas that are improved. They're going to be keeping the circulation on the interior of the site and removing that curb cut. So staff is supportive and does recommend approval of the conditional use permit with variance. Approval is subject to the following conditions: the plans that are date stamped January 8th, 2020 and February 10th, 2021. That the canopy materials at the plan, present at the Planning Commission and City Council meeting, which I'll go down to, it's just that it will match the brick columns and will be in this color, is what they're proposing. There really aren't any other changes to any of the materials. And that screening is to be installed between the main lot and the west residential property. The property owner is responsible for placement of any 6-foot tall solid wall fencing along the middle and south lots that are existing there currently. And if any landscaping dies, that it will be replaced. The final lighting plan at permit application must meet all of the minimum requirements per section 36-1260 of the City Code, and that it complies with the conditions and comments listed in the engineer's memo. It has been reviewed by the engineering department, and there will be a further review at permit. And with that, I will stop and answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Ocker. Do any members of the Planning Commission have questions for Ms. Ocker? Just say if you do. I don't see any right now because of our limitation of working by screen. Just shout it out if you have a question. Okay, well, I have one, Ms. Ocker. So we're being asked to approve two things, I believe. One is a conditional use permit and two is a variance. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And we have a different level of discretion between those, don't we? Could you talk about that briefly?
So I guess I'm asking what and what are you referencing in terms of conditions for them, or?
Yes. So like with a conditional use permit, what kind of discretion do we have?
Well, you are tied, the Planning Commission is tied to those condition or the criteria that I had listed previously, and they're more generalized in terms of that they would not have an adverse impact on government facilities, utility services, won't generate additional traffic, does not have, I mean, if it meets those criteria, then it meets the requirements for a conditional use permit. And so there probably isn't as much discretion as it would be for the variance. And with the variance, you can have conditions imposed upon a variance because those are based on whether it's a reasonable use of the property and whether it's justified given that it meets the unique circumstances of the property that's not that's different than every property that may be similarly zoned, and that it's not going to alter the essential character necessarily of the neighborhood.
Okay, so with a conditional use permit, if it meets those criteria, we have to issue the conditional use permit. Whereas with a variance, it's more kind of a judge. We have more room for judgment about whether we think a variance is appropriate and what kind of, and we have more judgment whether we think it's appropriate or what we could require in order
Correct.
to grant the variance.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Any other commissioners have any questions after that discussion? If not, we'll invite the applicant to come. Oh, hello, Commissioner Miranda.
Yeah, sorry, quick question. Yeah. So do we need the conditional use permit because the use precedes the requirement for one? Or because they're asking for a variance?
It would, even if it didn't need a variance, it would need a conditional use permit. So that's a requirement for a conditional use permit for a church use and their parking. So if they're going to be making changes to their parking, even if it meets the current code requirements, they would still have to go through this process of a conditional use permit.
Okay, thank you.
Any other commissioners with comments or questions?
And this is Jerry. I do have a quick one for Chris.
Okay, Commissioner Strauss.
Chris, the issue on the south lot line, what is encroaching? Is it just like a bumper stop or something like that? Is that the one that's encroaching on the lots to the south? I mean, is it the fact that they're parking cars right up to the property line, or is it the curb
No,
line?
there will be some setback between the parking lot and where the cars, or the parking lot and the lot line. It is getting closer by 2 to 3 feet. Right now, the parking is at an angle and it's further away towards the west, and it gets a little bit closer as you go, to the east. As you get closer to the west, it comes a little bit closer to the lot line. The problem that they run into right now is that their parking stalls are, they're too shallow and their drive aisles are not wide enough. They're not, the design is not to code. It doesn't meet our current standards. And so they're trying to just widen it up a bit so that they can meet our current requirements for our standards.
Okay, so I mean, so to be fully compliant, it just means that curb line, I mean, the buffer would have to meet the, whatever you said, 10 feet or whatever, but there's a considerable, so the houses directly to the south, we're looking at their backside, right? They must, the access to those homes must come from another southern street or southerly street?
Correct. Mendelson goes from south up to the north along the fronts of those homes, and they back up to the parking lot. Currently, there's a solid wall fence along that south lot line. And so part of the condition was that if there's any replacement needed, that the church would do that. They would put in a 6-foot solid wall fence for those residents that are directly to the south. There's currently a fence there.
Okay, that's good. Thank you, Chris.
Any other commissioners with questions? Well, we'll have an opportunity later. Does is someone on behalf of the applicant here tonight that would like to speak? Say whatever you'd like to say about this project.
Yes, my name is Gary Demely from Bush Architects in Minneapolis, and also a member of the church. I believe Peter is here. Peter, do you want to identify yourself?
Yes, this is Peter Barrett. I am on the Shepherd of the Hills Building and Grounds Committee, and I'm here to answer any questions you have. I'm also a resident of Edina and live across the street from the church on Maloney Avenue. So,
yes, we can answer questions. We also had a short 5-slide presentation that may be helpful for the commission to just see the existing facilities. If we could maybe share that with you. Shouldn't take very long to do that, but it has some photos that might be helpful in visualizing what's going on in what is currently there. So
That sounds great.
okay, Amanda, can you share that? Okay, so this first slide is the existing church, and you can see it's a brick church, and the as Chris had mentioned in her summary, the existing parking lot needs some help. So that's really the crux of the design, is to repave everything and redo curbs and get things working a little bit better. So we're going to do this in 2 phases. Phase 1 will focus on the, as it says here, the south parking lot. Phase 2 would be to actually build the canopy. So next slide. So here are some pictures. The canopy would be, as mentioned, made out of brick, and although that sample that you saw looked rather black, it's actually a dark bronze color. And so if we're successful with this, you would not even be able to identify where the addition of this canopy would take place. So the intent is to just blend in with the existing design that is there. And as I said, from the parking lot, we're not changing the function or the circulation, but we're just trying to, we just need a couple of extra feet to make our drive aisles conform with the city standard, and that's the reason for the variance. But and I think the other thing that's notable, if you can go to the next slide, starting in the upper left, as was mentioned, we're going to remove a curb cut, and we're going to connect that northwest parking lot with the drive aisle. So that should help from an engineering traffic standpoint. And you can see we've identified screening of new landscaping around that parking lot, and also to the other corner, the southeast parking lot. You can see we've identified where the screening is there. So we're trying to be good neighbors and keep it fresh looking. But we'll be upgrading curb cuts. We'll be putting in new paving. And as we said before, also the other feature that was not mentioned is near the front door, we're going to provide a rain garden that will help filtrate some of the drainage for parking before it leaves the property. And then to the right of that is the front door, and you can see we've put a note, provide ADA access to a new vestibule. So we'll be very minor grade alteration to try and level that out and provide a more accessible entry under this canopy and into a future new vestibule. So those are the issues, and we hope that you will understand the need for the variance to comply with the city's requirements for the drive aisles. So, Peter, is there anything else you'd like to add to my description there?
No, I think you did a great job covering all the work that we intend to do at the site.
Okay. Well, that was our last slide.
Okay.
So,
Well,
so thank you, Mr. Chair and Commission.
thank you. Do any commissioners have questions for the applicant? Okay. Well, there may be maybe in the later we'll have questions.
I do have a question, Ian. This is Commissioner Agnew.
Oh, Commissioner Agnew.
I might have missed this. Given that it's going to be in 2 phases, do you have estimated timing on these 2 phases?
Well, my understanding is phase 1 will begin immediately. Peter, do you have any more information on?
Yeah, I believe
phase 2.
Phase 1 will be this year. Obviously, we hope to get it off in the spring. Spring, early summer, get the project started. And then phase 2, we're thinking next spring.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right.
Other commissioners, any questions for the applicant? Okay. Well, maybe we'll have a few more in a moment. This is a public hearing, and with regard to public hearing matters, members of the public can comment on it. And to do that, I'll give some information. So you call 1-800-374-0221, enter conference ID 1443039, press *1. Operator will take your information. Press *1 if you want to speak, and then you'll be placed into a queue, and the operator will let you know when it's your opportunity to speak. You have 3 minutes at that point to talk, and we'll let you know when you're hitting or approaching those 3 minutes. If people do call in, if we get a few, we ask that you try to bring not just repeat what prior people before you said. Have we take into account all feedback regardless of whether we hear it once or twice or more than that. So with that, I'll turn over to Dan Riesig of our audiovisual team, and they'll let us know if there are any callers.
Thank you, Chair Member. As of right now, there are no callers in the queue. So, given the delay with the Facebook and TV broadcast, I would suggest you wait about 1 minute or so. About 7:29 or so, I'd say we can move forward if we don't have any calls.
So just wait a moment.
We do not have any additional callers, so I think we are okay to move forward.
Thanks, Dan. So with that, we need to formally close the public hearing. Would a member of the Planning Commission make a motion to do that?
I move to close the public hearing.
I second.
Ms. Olson, could you do a roll vote to close the public hearing?
Commissioner Strauss,
Aye.
Commissioner Agnew,
Aye.
Commissioner Berube,
Aye.
Commissioner Olson,
Aye.
Commissioner Miranda,
Aye.
Chair Nemerov.
So the next phase, we've closed the public hearing, and the next phase then is Planning Commission discussion. So if the Planning Commission has additional questions or comments, this is the opportunity for the Planning Commission to discuss this matter. or make a motion for approval or denial of the variance. Does anyone have any questions or comments or a motion?
I move to approve with the staff conditions.
I'll second.
Thanks. So to clarify, that's a motion to approve both the conditional use permit and the variance, correct,
Correct.
Joanne?
Correct.
And I believe Commissioner Miranda, did you second that?
Bennett.
Commissioner Bennett, and that's what you believe you're seconding, right? Okay. Any further discussion? Ms. Olson, could you do a roll vote, please?
Thank you. Commissioner Strauss,
Aye.
Commissioner Agnew,
Aye.
Commissioner Berube,
Aye.
Commissioner Olson,
Aye.
Commissioner Miranda,
Aye.
Commissioner Bennett,
Aye.
Chair Nemrov.
Aye. So it's approved, and we wish you good luck. I guess we wish you good luck, and thank you for coming before us tonight.
Well, thank you for your help. We really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair and Commission.
You're welcome. Our second public hearing tonight is for a variance request on 5301 West 60th Street. Also appearing for the city on this matter is Assistant Planner Chris Acker. Just whenever you, it's all yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Planning Commission. The site is located at 5301 West 60th Street. The property is a one-story home with an attached two-car garage. It backs up to a ponding area. They're limited in opportunity. You can see from the survey that they have a front yard setback that the house is lined up with currently. Both side yards are non-conforming. They're closer than the 10 feet that is currently required. They're at about 7.4 and 7.3 feet on either side. They also have a ponding area behind their home with the 50-foot setback that actually cuts into existing portions of the home. So in terms of the opportunity for expansion, they are boxed in on all sides. What they are proposing to do is to put a second floor above that main floor. They're asking for one variance in order to go straight up on that west side to be in line with that existing non-conforming setback. They're not going to put the second floor above the garage, so that will remain the same in terms of the non-conforming setback on the first floor. And then the additions to the back of the home, there is some limited opportunity for the alternate setback standard on the basement and on the main floor. They're able to match that existing non-conforming setback. Can't get any closer to the pond, so there is a little bit of expansion opportunity in this area that does not require a variance. And then also they're allowed to have an 80 square foot porch overlap into the front yard. So what they're asking for is a 2.1 foot side yard setback variance along the west lot line. This is the basement as it exists currently. And the proposal, they can match that existing non-conforming setback towards the back. And then on the main floor, this is existing, proposed, and the new second floor, which aligns with that westerly sidewall. And then the garage is just the one-story piece that's further to the east. This would be the new front elevation of the home, and then the side elevation towards the west. So it's this upper floor that they're requesting a variance for, and it's to align with the existing non-conforming setback. They won't be getting any closer or reducing that setback that's already existing. And then the rear elevation towards the pond, and also the sidewall of the garage. This is a rendering of the new home in context with the homes on either side. And then below it, you'll see the existing structure with the homes on either side. So I'm going to show you a few examples of homes that are down the block. This is just a few doors down. This house is it looks like a 2.5-story home. And then the one next to it, you may have recognized there was a variance for first floor elevation last year that you reviewed. That house was non-conforming in terms of side yard setbacks, but they had to elevate the basement. So then there's a new home that's going in between those two homes, and that will be a 2-story home. And then the one next to that also has been either remodeled or torn down and rebuilt. And there's a number of homes. If you turn the corner on Hanson, there's a few homes that also have been redone. And then 2 homes that back up to the pond, so opposite to the subject home, that have been remodeled. So the question is, does it meet the criteria for variance approval? Does it relieve practical difficulties that prevent a reasonable use from complying with the ordinance? Clearly, they've had some challenges in terms of trying to add on to the home, given the constraints that they have with setback. They can't go forward. They can't get any closer to the pond with the exception of this small area here. And then the side yard setbacks are already non-conforming. So the opportunity they have is very limited. Granting the variances will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood. I've shown you a few homes that have been redone in the neighborhood. There's actually more than that, but these are the ones that are currently on Google Map. Staff does support the request and does recommend approval given the constraints on the property for a 2.1-foot west side yard setback variance. Approval should be subject to the survey date stamped January 21st, 2021, pardon me. Plans date stamped January 20th, 2021, and then compliance with the conditions and comments listed in the environmental engineer's memo, which there really isn't a drastic change. So in terms of the grading and drainage on the property. And with that, I will stop and answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Ocker. Do any commissioners have questions for Ms. Ocker?
Yeah,
just feel free.
Chair,
Okay.
I have a quick question.
Well, Commissioner Strauss.
Yes. Yeah, Chris, just a quick, so it's a non-conforming setback from the existing house to going straight up, and they're not encroaching anymore, right? So it's just a continuation of that same position of the lower floor, correct?
That's correct. Yes.
And then as I look, the building height, they're well under what the city standard would be, right? So it's almost 6 or more, 6 feet or so
Correct.
lower than what it could be.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Chris. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Any other commissioners? Just speak up if you do. Feel free.
This is Commissioner Agnew. So just to clarify, if they did anything to this, short of demolishing the entire house and rebuilding, right? If they did anything within the existing footprint, it would require a variance. Is that correct, given that it's existing non-conforming?
Pretty much. They are so limited. They have no, any direction they'd like to go, they'd have to address with a variance.
Okay, that helps. Thank you.
Other commissioners, just speak up. Feel free. Well, the lack of speaking up suggests to me that now would be a good opportunity for the applicant, if the applicant would like to make a presentation about this project. Not required.
This is John Honey. I'm the homeowner. I don't have an additional presentation to provide. In fact, I don't think I could do anything more than what Chris did. That's way more than I would have expected. So thank you, Chris, for putting that together. And probably less is more in this case. So if you guys have questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Less is more. That's well said. And do anyone have any questions for the applicant? Well, thank you. Hang on, maybe questions will come up. Well, now the next phase of the public hearing is a public hearing, which allows members of the public to speak. And I'll give those numbers again. If anyone would like to call in and provide some commentary on this matter, dial 800-374-0221, conference ID 1443039, press *1 to be placed into queue. The operator will take your information. You'll give your name and address. You'll have up to 3 minutes to speak. All we ask, the only thing we'll let you know when the 3 minutes, when you're approaching and you're hitting the 3 minutes. We only ask, if you can, if previous callers have said what you're going to say, just, doesn't help to repeat it. But so I'll ask the audio-visual team if they have any callers.
Thank you, Chair. As of right now, there are again no callers in the queue, but I would recommend we wait the 1 minute till just turned 7:42, so I would say 7:43. And that has been 1 minute, and we do not have any additional callers.
Thank you. So that means that the Planning Commission can close the public hearing. We need a motion and a second to do so.
I move to close the public hearing.
And I'll second.
Ms. Olson, could you do a roll vote, please?
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner Strauss,
Aye.
Commissioner Agnew,
Aye.
Commissioner Berube,
Aye.
Commissioner Olson,
Aye.
Commissioner Miranda,
Aye.
Commissioner Bennett,
Aye.
Chair Nemrov.
So that the next phase of the consideration of the matter is the Planning Commission discussion, further questions or motion. Do any members of the Planning Commission have any questions or comments? Commissioner Agnew.
In these situations, I always love to hear from, a neighbor that's on one of the sides or any feedback. And given that I didn't see any written communications, nor did we get anyone calling in today, I just want to confirm with the city what the communication approach was for these neighbors to ensure that they had sufficient ability to give any feedback if they had some. Chris, is that something that you can speak to?
Sure, I can answer that question. We do send out notification within 200 feet. So the adjacent neighbors and the neighbors across the street would have received a notification, as would the people across the pond, because the lot does go through the pond. We also posted on the Better Together Edina site. People could submit comments. I also had a conversation with the property owner, encouraging them to go around to speak to the neighbors prior to sending out public hearing notices, so that they would be aware of the project. And the city didn't receive any comments.
Okay. Could the homeowner speak to that? Did you take the opportunity to?
Commissioner Agnew, we took the guidance from Chris that we had to do like a 200 foot radius, and handed out, I think, maybe 15 to 20 flyers throughout the neighborhood. Everybody was supportive. The one neighbor to the west of the house that the variance impacts mostly, we had a conversation outside. We showed her the plans, explained to her that it's not encroaching towards her house any more than it is right now, and she was fully supportive of that and said, go right ahead. So don't take my word for it, but if you got to call Susan Spindler, I don't know her, but she's the house right to the west, and she'll probably say the same thing.
Thank you. I always like to make sure that everyone is fully aware. So thank you for that confirmation. And Chris, thank you for your confirmation as well. That's the only question I had.
Thank you. Yeah, that's something we're all interested in. Any other questions or comments by members of the planning commission? Commissioner Bennett.
Yeah, I'll just share a couple quick things. So first, appreciate the proposal before us, as well as the desire to kind of work with the confines of what you got. Less is more, right? That goes a long way, and hence probably why most people are supportive. Secondly, we see this kind of thing a lot, and it just triggers a variance by no fault of your own. It was existing when you came there, so we got that. And then with this little sliver of discretion we do have, something very important to myself is the character of the neighborhood. And just through the photos and kind of going through that area, just what is proposed seems to match there and not, inhibit any potential issues aesthetically and otherwise. So I'm fully supportive of this, and I urge other commissioners to agree if they don't already.
Anyone else? Any other commissioners with questions or further comments or further questions? Anyone with a motion?
I move approval of the variance as requested and outlined in the staff report.
Yes, I will second that.
Anything further by anyone? Ms. Olson, could you do a roll vote of that motion then?
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner Strauss,
Aye.
Commissioner Agnew,
Aye.
Commissioner Berube,
Aye.
Commissioner Olson, Commissioner Miranda,
Aye.
Commissioner Bennett,
Aye.
Chair Nemrov.
Hi. So congratulations to the applicant and good luck with that lovely home remodel.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And that takes us to the next item on our agenda. We're done with the public hearings. Next, we have reports and recommendations. And the one item we have is something we get fairly regularly. We get a sketch plan review, which is just a high-level review of the concepts and the ideas and some, preliminary drawings of what someone's wishing to propose. Tonight, we have a development on 4404 Valley View Road. Presenting on behalf of the City of Edina is our Community Development Director, Carrie Teague. Carrie, you are now the presenter.
Okay, great. Thank you, Chair, members of the commission. Okay, there we go. So this property is located in the Valley View and Wooddale. This is within the area where we did a small area plan a couple of years ago. Oak Lawn and Valley View. Currently the site is vacant. It has a PCD1 planned commercial district zoning, similar to the remainder of this commercial district. This graphic highlights that it is within that the neighborhood node, the small area plan that we did for Valley View and Wooddale. The maximum density here is 30 units an acre within this district. And there is a 2-story and 30-foot height limitation. You can see the site is located here, highlighted in yellow. This site was part of the 2018 plan that was approved, known as the Edina Flats. The property along Kellogg has been developed. This site was to be developed with a 4-unit, 2-story apartment complex that has not been built. As I mentioned, the site sits vacant today. What the applicant is proposing here is to put a 13-unit, 3-story, and 35-foot, an all-affordable housing project. There would be 13 units and 13 surface parking stalls. So a little bit unique from what we've seen recently, but again, it's an all-affordable housing project. Here's a look at what the building potentially could look like. So again, 35 feet tall with a flat roof. The maximum again here is 2 stories, but 30 feet. So we're 5 feet above the maximum height requirement. They would be requesting some variances would be needed. The previous project received somewhat similar variances, as it's difficult to make anything fit here without the need for a variance. So really along all lot lines. And again, I mentioned the height, and there would be a floor area ratio. And in terms of parking, the code requires that parking stalls be enclosed. So that would be another variance. They're providing the same amount of spaces that would be required otherwise, just not enclosed. So this would require a comprehensive plan amendment. So it would be a 4/5 vote of the city council. And that's because of within that small area plan, we do have that height limit. It is consistent with the density that's allowed within this district. Conditional use permit for the housing and the variances that I mentioned. So some of the primary issues to consider is the density here. We're increasing from 4 units that was previously approved to 13 units, but it is still within the density range when you take the whole of the Edina Flats. The affordable housing that's proposed, thoughts on surface parking that is all exposed. We have had similar experience with this with an affordable housing project adjacent just north of Southdale, the 66 West project. They also provided surface parking stalls, no underground parking. So we have a history of doing this type of parking arrangement. Discussion on the height. This is within the neighborhood plan discussed as the gateway to the Valley View Wooddale node. Again, this is the far east, southeast end. And there is quite a bit of, so here's the site here, and you can see Valley View Road and Oaklawn as it comes together. There is quite a large green space within this area. Some type of signage or something could be provided within that area, kind of introducing as drivers enter the district. So that could be a possibility. With that, I will stop there and answer any questions you may have in terms of process or the project itself. And Dean DeVolis is here on behalf of the development team to present the project in a little more detail.
Thank you,
Jimmy, I have a quick question for you.
Go.
Carrie, could you speak in a little more detail as to how this relates to the...
I'm sorry, I didn't catch the end of that. It relates
how
to...
this parcel relates and fits into the small area plan.
Yeah, so it's on the far edge of the plan. Maybe I'll put my... So this is the small area plan, the neighborhood node here. It's on the far end. It does exceed the height requirement. We did talk about 2 stories and 30 feet within the plan, so it exceeds that by 5 feet. But the residential use is consistent with the plan. We talked about concentrating the commercial development closer to the intersection here. So that this kind of follows that pattern. So other than the 5-foot height increase and the extra story, the project would be consistent with the small area plan.
And that is helpful. Was this as part of the neighborhood node?
It is, yes.
And I guess for some people maybe not as familiar with that, what type of uses fall under that?
So it would be residential, and in this case, the zoning permits it. It would be a conditionally permitted use. Commercial uses would be allowed here. This is the former Burley site. The hair salon was located on that property. And office would be another use that would be permitted on that site.
Great, thanks.
Commissioner Strauss.
Yes, Carrie, perhaps you could, under the compliance table, you know, the floor area ratio, city standard being 1.0 and requested 1.14. Could you maybe elaborate or explain more fully what that means, that floor area ratio?
Certainly, that is the square footage of the development itself compared to the lot size. So the total square footage of the 3 floors is just over, it exceeds the 1 compared to the total lot size. So it's just a slight increase, but so the mass of the building is a little larger than what would be allowed by code.
And that's that 3rd floor. I mean, that's probably
right
where that comes in. Okay. Thank you.
Excuse me, sorry. Any other commissioners?
Yeah, Commissioner Miranda. Yes, thank you. So the lot is oddly shaped because of what apparently used to be 62nd Street that went through. So has there been any discussion recently or ever to sell that from the city to make it part of the lot so it would be more standard?
There have been some discussions in the past. However, there's a lot of utilities within that area, so not much really can be used for that site other than signage or park benches or something like that. But you're right, if that were included here, I guess it could provide some justification for a variance to exceed the FAR, and that the perception is the lot is a little bit bigger than it actually is.
Right, thank you.
I had a quick question. It's Joanne.
Commissioner Wilson.
So Carrie, remind me, have we approved any other height variances with the other developments in this small area plan area?
We have not. The rest of the Edina Flats project is conforming. They're allowed, let me see here. Yeah, nope, there have been no other variances.
Okay, that's what I was thinking. And then is it typical that we spread out the density? You know, it was a part of an original development proposal, but it's over different parcels. Is that typical? Do we?
Yeah, it's not typical that they're separated like this, but we did, when the Edina Flats went in, we did calculate the density using the 2 sites combined. If you were to just consider that site on its own, it would exceed the 30 units per acre.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else with questions for staff? I had the same question about units per acre on this site alone, so. Well, we'll have an opportunity again to ask questions or make comments, but I guess I'd welcome Mr. DeVolis. Anyone else who likes to speak on behalf of the project?
Commissioners, good evening. I'd first like to have Michael Margulies lead off, and then I'll jump in. So thank you.
Thank you. It's Michael Margulies. I'm with Valerian LLC, and along with DGR, we are here with Dave Remick, the owner of the property. I'm going to let Dean walk you through the sketch plan and the drawings, but the overriding factor here that's driving this development, and I think that justifies some of the accommodations that we're asking the city to consider is that this is pretty unique in terms of what we're trying to do with respect to affordability. This will be 13 condominium style residences that will be for sale and that will be subject to an affordable covenant for the full 20-year period that the city requires. That means that they cannot be sold beyond for a sale price that is greater than what the city of Edina through the Minnesota policies have set as the maximum purchase price, and that's also balanced by the amount of income that the purchaser earns. So this is a unique chance to put affordably restricted for sale homes in Edina, which is one of the city's primary affordable housing goals that has been difficult to meet. And it's a stretch to make this work as a developer, but with appropriate accommodations in terms of giving us a little help on height and density, I think that we can make this work. And this would be a great advance for the affordable housing policy in Edina. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Dean, who can describe the specifics of the design. And Dave Remick is also standing by if anybody has questions for him. Thanks.
Thank you, Michael. Good evening. This project is probably more unique because, and I may be incorrect, but looking back at Edina's records, the last affordable ownership housing project in Edina actually dates all the way back to Centennial Lakes. So this is the first one brought forward in 50 years in the ownership category. There's affordable rental that's being built and considered, but in terms of affordable ownership, this is the first one in I think 5 decades that has come forward. And achieve affordability, you have to do certain things in terms of unit design, site design, project design to get there. Carrie alluded to one, surface parking versus structure parking. Why? Every underground parking space costs $30,000. Every surface space costs $2,000. That's a big step towards affordability in getting there. 2, simplicity of design. If you notice the building's a rectangle, we could have contorted it to fit the lot, but then it would have made the building much more expensive. So the simplicity of shape and size is another factor we worked in. Third thing, and if you could sort of tell by looking at the plans, this is designed to potentially be a modular building. And if you've read we're developing a lot of modular projects right now, Thrives Modular, which has proven cost savings. And the setup had that same plan integrated with it. Fourth thing, I should say, it's a non-elevator building. It's a 3-story walk-up. It does have the proper number of fire stairs, but an elevator itself takes out hundreds of thousands. By doing these design moves, we've been able to create an affordable building ownership basis, which I think is a really big deal because now we're giving an ability for residents to have permanence. And the other factor, you want to locate affordable buildings in neighborhoods that have services. And this area has transit, it has supporting groceries, restaurants, elements like that. Convenience, I should say, elements that make this a desirable place to live. Because generally, as you probably know, most affordable projects tend to get pushed out to periphery locations. And so this is really one that really has nearby services that are within walking, and the services of Southdale are just a matter of a mile away. So it's really a good location to support the services needed by the affordable units and that basis. We try to work with the design guidelines, Evaluative Design Guidelines, and in your packet, the page number 49 shows this site as a row house. So if you look at your packet, there's reference to and it's a 2.5-story row house that was referenced on the site. That's what we use as a guide. And all the units on the main floor and the front have external entries so that the building has front porches, sidewalks, entries, much like the rendering that you see on page 49, but lacking that full flight of stairs. So where that full flight of stairs is basically where our third story is. So we try to work within the design guidelines or respect them, but in order to create a building that gave us the affordability, we had to do these certain elements of make it work by keeping the footprint simple, increasing the density a bit, and simplifying design, but still keeping the design aesthetics of the district. And that was key in terms of making this project work. So we have nice size units of 1,500 square feet to over 40, one bedroom is 1,500, 1,900 square feet. So they're nice size units, they're livable units, they're quality units, but it's a very efficient building, as you can see by the floor plan. So we have very little space dedicated to non-living use to keep it affordable, but it's a good building with the main floor building having digital entry, the units being nicely sized, and aesthetic building. So it's affordability that has a quality of dignity, and it's affordability that's going to live on under what Michael mentioned, which is critical. And this, we believe is a good start in creating alternatives affordability in Edina. The market for affordable rental is beginning, but the market or availability of ownership housing, this is really the beginning since it's Centennial Lakes development. So this is quite significant. And we hope this building being successful that we find other pocket sites in Edina which will replicate this model and going forward. So that's the foundation that we're coming in as to. And yes, it does need a little bit of variance, a little bit of help, but this is what makes it work in terms of the numbers and makes this feasible. We believe that given that we're sticking with the townhouse style design that was mentioned in the Valley View area plan, that it's respecting the neighborhood small area plan, but we had to tweak it in order to make the affordability work with it as elements I mentioned like the parking and so forth. So we're excited about this project. We're excited what it could do in terms of opening up a new chapter in Edina of affordable ownership housing. And it's, we think, a nice amenity in the node to provide a little density that supports the adjoining businesses and retail that's located within the Valley View district. So I'll conclude my presentation here. I'll see we're all available for questions. So thank you for hearing us this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Margulies, Mr. Dovolis. This is the opportunity of the sketch plan for commissioners to give their feedback, ask further questions about development. Commissioner Berube, why don't you kick us off?
Yes, thank you for the presentation. I applaud the affordable housing. These are attractive. I know it's only the sketch plan, so we would look forward to, more detail, but, as a sketch plan, it looks good. A couple things though. One is I suspect I know how you're going to answer this, but it's about parking. Underground parking is expensive, but surface parking versus underground is such a dramatic, difference between the two and the aesthetics around a building. So give us a sense of how much the cost for underground parking would affect the affordability and what else you could do.
Take 13 spaces times $30,000. I don't have a calculator in front of me.
But that would be over 20 years, divided by 20, right? Because you only pay for that once.
But
right.
Still, but it's embedded into the overall cost of building, plus the operating costs of maintaining that garage, heating the garage and so forth. Plus, we need to add an elevator then, because under the ADA code, we have to provide ADA access to the garage. So a 4-stop elevator, that's another $120,000 plus its operating costs. So you can see that one gesture of the parking suddenly adds a considerable base cost of the building that has to be absorbed by the purchasers, which pushes it out of the affordability range. And Michael, do you have a question?
Well, I'd like to add to that. The other factor is the design aspect of attempting to put in underground parking requires lead ramps and speed ramps.
Correct.
That would basically render, I think, I'm not the architect here, but my guess is that we couldn't get this design to work if we had to implement underground parking.
And Michael's correct. We can only fit 6 spaces. So then it would be grossly underparked on top of it, which is a good point, Mike. I forgot the minute. So it just gets, it really, it makes it impossible. I don't say really make it just makes it impossible to make this building affordable. The only way you can solve it is you said no parking, like in Minneapolis. But Edina doesn't have the density of transit yet to go that route. And so in order to make people feel successful and have access to transportation, the parking lot has to be a requirement in this era in Edina at this point. In the future, it may change, but today we parked it 1 stall per 1 unit because we think that's what's needed for this location. It does have some transit, but not enough density for someone to be able to live here without a car.
So there are also, just to add one other point, we don't like sort of open parking expanses either. It's not as aesthetically pleasing as we'd like. The one feature that this property allows us to do is to shield that parking pretty well by extensive landscaping and by that type of barrier. So at the end of the day, I think that we'll be able to reduce the visual impact that the 13 spaces have.
Yeah, so what's not seen in our sketch plan is a landscape plan with this. And that is our intent, to make a strong edge of landscaping along Valley View and have that lot be behind it. So you won't see an expansive open parking with just a green edge. You'll see a green barrier, whether it's arborvitae or some type of vegetation. So the only urban impact we hopefully see is that there's just not a building in that location, but there's a strong defining green edge. Example, we did the Bank of America by Southdale, and we did that row of arborvitae in the screen wall, really make that parking lot disappear and the ATM disappeared right through ATM. And that worked pretty successfully. So that's sort of the same basic idea we want to work with this to help reduce the impact of the surface parking.
I think that would be really important. And so I'm glad to hear you say that. You know, the positives of having affordable housing, and particularly affordable housing ownership in that node, I think is huge. And for us, you know, if you don't live in that area, it's very easy to say, yes, this is what we need to do. But if you're the house next to that and you're going to have a big surface lot, you know, you can understand that that's really your hurdle, right?
Yeah.
But in that context, one of the things that I think is really important to point out too is, you know, affordable housing, you're talking about people, they still make, you know, Carrie or Chris can give us the exact number, but these are the teachers and the firefighters and the police officers,
Correct.
right? So sometimes I think there's a connotation of affordable housing, you know, just those words. And while everybody deserves safe, clean housing, no matter what the history and no matter what the income, and, you know, it's much different to think more of it like workforce housing, which if these are purchase place, it's workforce housing, right? Which I think has a completely different connotation and might be more palatable to the neighborhood.
And the fact that, you know, the opportunity of ownership, which is a big deal for people to build wealth in the United States.
Yes, absolutely. Overall, I think it's great. I think your hurdle is going to be the neighborhood.
Understood and agreed.
As you know.
Yep.
Thank you, Commissioner Berube.
Thank you.
Other Commissioner Miranda, would you like to? Yeah, please, Lou.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think this project is great. I love the 100% affordability of it. I think everything's fine in terms of, the density is fine, the height's fine. It's 5 feet over, but I think that's fine for, what we're trying to do here with affordability. And the setbacks are fine. My only real concern, I understand, you mentioned this because of affordability, is that you made the building rectangular. I'd almost prefer, and this is why I asked initially about the triangle of land to the south, because I would almost prefer, if we're trying to build a little, village here, right, and having the building kind of along Valley View Road, facing the road, I think would provide a much nicer environment. And even though the parking is screened, I mean, it's just something you have to walk past that has no real interest. And if there was some way to make the building longer and thinner, and that would go along, more along the street, and then maybe have a single row of parking behind it or something, I think would, from an urban perspective, from a, just making it feel like part of a village, and certainly, it's the gateway to the whole village, so it's kind of important, I think, how it looks. I think that would add to it. Sure.
We tried that. We tried to parallel Valley View, and it does we couldn't get it to fit because the parking wouldn't work. It's a puzzle because of the unusual shape of the site. We sort of need the mass at the east end of the site and the parking at the west end of the site. And when we turned the building, it pushed a lot of parking up against a single family home, and we could not get the amount of parking. What we tend to do, because I agree with what you're saying on the village, what we hope to do is the Oak Lawn side and what I call the parking lot side will all have the townhouse look. And on the side that faces Valley View, we're going to add a porch and an entry element, so it looks all the three sides that face the two principal streets, and probably will have entry elements, door elements, porch elements, so it looks like it's addressing the street. You're not looking at the side of the building. So we intend to have that kind of element, sort of like the townhouses rendering that you see in page 49 of your packet. That was part of the guidelines, because I agree with you, it needs to be a gateway, but in terms of the puzzle, we couldn't get that to work. We did try that desperately, and you can sort of see by the geometries, it's unforgiving because parking has very hard requirements, and you probably noticed that when you did the church approvals, that you have to have exactly the right aisle width, stall width, and so forth. And you can't vary from that, unfortunately, because cars don't vary enough in size. So, but we will take that in consideration in terms of the Valley View facade and the Oakland facade, because I agree, we need to maintain the village feel and make the building feel very comfortable to approach.
Great, thank you.
No, thank you.
Other commissioners who'd like to go, we'll all have an opportunity. I'm sorry, Commissioner Berube?
I actually have a question for staff, if now is the appropriate time to ask them.
In time.
So, Carrie, I have a question regarding, when you purchase affordable housing, the idea is it's the price at which it can transact over the next 20 years is set, it's capped as a percentage of the average income of the area of Edina. Is that correct?
It's the Twin City area, not just Edina, right?
Correct.
Okay, so what happens if the homes in the area increase exponentially? For 20 years, the units in this building are capped. So I am eligible for this in year 10, and I buy one, and then I guess what I'm trying to say is, how do you know someone's not going to just buy them and then rent them out or whatever with the idea on year 21 they're going to have a huge windfall because all of a sudden the cap is gone?
That is a potential, but within those 20 years, there would be a land use covenant attached to each property to make sure that it doesn't happen within that 20-year window. But that's not to say if that expires, potentially someone could profit.
Okay, so on the other hand, someone could buy it any of those between year 1 and year 19 and a day before 20 years, and then they would build up equity and potentially build up very quickly depending on what year they bought it.
They would. The Centennial Lakes project that Mr. DeVolis referred to,
Yep.
those covenants have expired, and those units are pretty affordable today. I don't know if they exactly fit our criteria, but they're pretty close.
And the areas around them have increased with the market?
Correct. Yeah, Centennial Lakes for sure. Yep.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Just wondering about, the market factors and the economics of it all. When you have a set number and you're, it's a little bit like rent control, but on the purchase side, and you get some unintended consequences. So, thank you.
Good questions. Other commissioners? Commissioner Strauss.
Yes, since Carrie, maybe if this might be the time, have the affordable housing, and I'm trying to think what the organization, it's a committee or a commission for the city, have they weighed in on this project?
They have not weighed in specifically. I do attend those meetings. We just met this past Tuesday, and I did tell them about the project. So it's on their radar. In the past, they have weighed in on affordable housing projects. So perhaps we could do that with a formal application.
Okay, that might be a great idea. Other commissioners?
Actually, that would be our intention. We had sort of a which comes first issue, and before we really get too far into establishing the affordable program, we wanted to make sure that we had a project that had some possibility of being built.
And the other thing is, the Centennial Lakes is interesting, and it'd be up to Affordable Housing Foundation. They also provided a $10,000 mortgage downstroke that if you live there for several years, that would evaporate. There may be an additional layer we can put on top of the affordability that would also help it in terms of the mortgage downstroke that's required. Don't know that yet, it's just speculation, but Centennial Lakes had that model, which was very effective. And it was in that case, it was set up for Edina residents to encourage younger residents to move in Edina. And that's what the basis of that program was 50 years ago. Potential this kind of element here through the foundation. Haven't asked them, but just looking at a good program that was historically worked well 50 years ago.
Okay, I have another question for staff. Just thinking about the market forces here. Because the price is going to be capped in an attractive area, you would think you're going to have more more demand than supply. But the price can only increase so far. So how do you determine who gets the units?
That might be a question for the developer.
That's part of that relates back to the last question. Edina's inclusionary housing policy doesn't have a specific protocol for this, but it is, in terms of going forward, we will have to develop a protocol. So we will and work with the city to have them approve it. We know what some of the four corners of it are. We know there's a maximum price. We know that there are income limitations, and in terms of who can buy it. And then there's going to be requirements as to where the property is listed for sale and how the property has to be sold. In many municipalities, for example, these properties have to be listed through at least a city-approved protocol. You just can't sell it to your brother-in-law.
Correct.
You need to sell it to the public and make the public who's interested and capable and desirous of affordable housing have the opportunity to bid on this. So there are a number of protocols. Edina is really lucky to have a terrific affordable housing officer in Ms. Hawkinson, and she will help us figure out the right protocol.
And Michael makes a very good point on all that, because there'll be a very pent-up demand for this. So this process is important. Another factor is Edina has done this for 50 years. In some ways, we're establishing the groundwork for projects going forward with this one.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Agnew.
Again, like, just to reiterate, I love that this is coming through. So thank you for all the work that you've done on this. I think it's definitely something that the city needs. I have 2 points. One is that the comprehensive plan does call to buffer from parking to the north. And I do know that this parking lot, I mean, half of it, right, would be quite visible from that house. And I understand that it's a Tetris game, puzzle, whatever, and the pieces are hard to fit together, but that's something that stands out to me of not really following the guidelines and potentially being concerning. The question that I have is, so the southwest corner, where it comes like as close as it possibly can to that sidewalk, how close is it to that sidewalk?
Right now, it's probably a couple feet. And here's where you compromise. We maximize the distance from the house to allow that buffer to go in. So we're like saying, if we had a cheat, we're probably cheating a little more towards Valley View. And we may work with the city to use the right-of-way between the sidewalk and our property line as a green buffer. And we've done that before when we did the 2 buildings at 70th and France, a commercial. We actually, the city allowed us to use their right-of-way to create a sufficient buffer. So we're hoping that we have the same ability that between the sidewalk and our parking lot, we can use that to enhance the landscape buffer, because we want to stay as far away from the house to the north as possible to really allow that buffer to be dense.
Yeah, and I live in this neighborhood and walk to Snuffy's quite often in the summer. And I could literally see myself like animatedly walking with my baby in the stroller and like hitting off the side of the sidewalk, the building. It looks like it's that close. So make sure that there is a good buffer there as well.
Okay.
And maybe I understand that it has to be that rectangle to really drive down the cost savings. But look into what would it be to cut that corner, pull it back 5-10 feet too.
I'll look at it, but I'll tell you that starts destroying affordability. It just, once you start triangulating a building stuff, it gets tough. We'll try to tighten it up as much as possible. It may slide a little bit further north once we get into more details to respect what you're saying. And we can even play with the rectangle, a few baits and stuff. But once I start getting unusual shapes, especially if this may go modular, then it gets a lot tougher. I start eroding what we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, I understand.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's see, Commissioner Strauss.
Yes, perhaps a question, for Mr. DeVolis. That area to the east, would be, east of the sidewalk. Is that public right away, or is that land that you would control?
You mean that triangular shape off the end, that
Correct.
little point?
Yeah.
It's public land. What we'd probably propose is we could landscape it, maintain it, so it appears as part of the project, make the setbacks look more rich. Because right now, all it is a grassy knoll with very little landscaping. I think there's a few daylilies in the middle, if I remember. But we would propose to landscape that and maintain it. Whether we pull it into part of our property for FAR reasons to be seen. But I think the minimum is we'd want to treat it, maintain it, enhance it as part of this project.
And that's exactly, I think that's going to be an important element for your future presentations. I know economy is important, but that's going to sort of, it's that whole idea of this being kind of the gateway.
Yep.
That could be, it'd be wonderful if there's something there that, I think that emotionally that could have a lot of reward for how people view, what's happening, depending on what they might see in that area. Thank you.
That's our intent. So thank you.
So other questions or comments by the commission? Commissioner Bennett.
Thank you for the presentation. Very exciting. Seen a lot of different things in the area, and it's good to see something innovative. And although it's more housing, it's bringing a diverse offering for it. So whenever we can see more diversity in an area, the more favorable I am toward welcoming it there. I guess the only thing I'd say that hasn't been said, or at least worth reiterating, was something that Commissioner Miranda brought up, and that was just the outline of the building and how it's shaped on the lot. And I remember when this was brought to us in a prior proposal, one suggestion I had was to work with the city to try to, give enough of that little sliver of land that apparently has the utilities in it to the developer to make it more worthwhile for them. And so I'm wondering, and maybe the extent of where those utilities are, but even if it's not you guys getting all of that parcel, but maybe you only need 10 feet of the one corner to turn the building and then bring the road around to do kind of, angled parking and a through street for one side or the other. I'd be much more in favor of it if it went along Valley View. Otherwise, it's awesome. Keep it up, and looking forward to hear what type of model you're going to do for the ownership to make that affordable, since there are options out there, and Minnesota does have some as models to choose from. So thanks.
No, thank you.
Commissioner Olson, I don't know if you've had, was there anything you'd like to share?
Thanks. Well, everything's, again, I agree. I'm really excited about this project and understand that you're really trying to, it's a difficult shape to fit what you're trying to fit. So I'm looking forward to seeing the landscaping plan and how you're screening and a little bit more on the design. I know you're trying to keep it affordable, but as much as we can still make it fit in with the neighborhood and the overall small area plan, I'd like to see that. Guess what's that building right to the west? That existing building and parking lot. I'm going blank. What's that use?
That's the daycare, I believe, has moved into that building.
Right. Is that Okay.
Yeah, it's the New Horizon daycare.
Yep.
Right, right. Okay. Because I was just wondering, if it was the parking lot and if there's a way to maybe share some of that parking, just to, they're right there, right next to each other. And that would maybe give you a little bit more space to fit the building to face more in Valley View, but I don't know.
That's a tough order. Another reason
Yeah.
I'm sensitive to that, just trying to share the driveway, the project we proposed across the street was a real battle to try to
Right.
reduce the number of curb cuts. So
Yeah, I was
I,
thinking of
I
that
like
too.
I like your thinking, but I think it's tough to accomplish.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I thought I'd throw it out there and just
No.
see. But otherwise, looking forward to seeing the advanced plans and, ownership, affordable housing is really exciting. Thank you.
No, thank you.
Any other commissioners? Otherwise, I have a few things, but I want to give everyone else a chance. Commissioner Strauss, you had your hand up. Was that just like scratching your forehead? Okay. All right. Well, Mr. DeWolf, Mr. Margulies, Mr. Remick, thank you very much for this presentation. It is kind of fun to be seeing something different. We've had a lot of conversations and a lot of discussions within the city. We had a about housing and different types of housing. We had a housing task force that was very interested in different types of housing models to meet different types of housing needs. And this project seems to be very responsive to what that issue, which is an important issue. I think it's a great location for what you're proposing. You talked about being close to services, which I agree with. I believe Commissioner Berube spoke about workforce housing, and I put those together because not only is it close to services, but it's close to jobs. And so I can envision people living here and working at Valley View and Wooddale, or working at Southdale, and being a very convenient location for people who are working in a very short commute. So I think it's a wonderful location for this project, and a good fit for this space, which has been a challenge. It's been a challenge for the current developer, and this is a nice way to approach it. It's near transit. There's an express stop, I think, a block away, and perhaps across the street also, going the other direction. So, this is a great location for this project. A few questions and comments. First of all, comments that have been raised that I share, that I like to think about, is I look forward to seeing the landscaping. I do think landscaping will be important. And
Agreed.
I do think that the nearness of the building to the sidewalk is something to address. If we can get a little more space there, it'd be great. I mean, as it is, it looks like you can almost like reach out and touch someone, or reach out and touch the building if you're walking by, or somebody could open up a hot dog vending stand from their window and sell it to passersby. And maybe just a little, another foot or two might be good.
Yeah. Micro retail. Sorry, go ahead.
What's that?
Micro retail.
Yeah. A couple more specific questions. Before I get there, I wanted to ask you from maybe kind of a little primer of what you're thinking about with regard to modular. I assume you mean modular construction to hold down costs. Could you maybe talk about that for a minute, kind of what you're thinking?
Sure. And I'll give you some examples. We just completed a modular building, 30 unit, at Hiawatha and 42nd in Minneapolis, which is built and now occupied. We have a 7-story modular building going up in St. Paul on West 7th. And we have several others that are coming along too. If you look up Google Rise Modular, or you could Google DJ Architecture, you can find the articles. We've been working about 3 years with this company to develop modular housing to create better affordability, because we first played with stick, went to panelize, that didn't go there, and then finally started with their modular. And that started to get at the problem of creating affordable housing. The units are manufactured in Old Town of Minnesota, and then they're trucked in and then stacked on site. And what it allows is the construction timeline to be cut by 40%, maybe even further. The units are all built within a heated, air-conditioned space, and the quality is first rate. They're actually stronger and better than stick construction. So any of the commissioners, are more than welcome to go with me, because I go down the plant quite a bit to inspect the projects I'm doing there. So anyone wants to ride with me and actually see the process I put together is more than welcome, where they can see the finished product in Minneapolis. So it really is a method that we've found successful, and we're starting to do more and more projects with it. The Minneapolis Public Housing Agency contacted us to start relooking at all their sites using this methodology. So that's really history. We've proven it. We built the first building. It's occupied. So it's not new to us anymore. And now we've gone a lot greater structures, like 7 stories modular, 192 units and so forth. So it's just another element to study to try to keep affordability in the equation, but not lose quality. So that's the basic. But Google Rise or Google DGR, you can see the various articles about it. And then, like say, anyone's welcome to tour the plant with me and actually see the units being put together.
That's like a cool opportunity. You said Google, did you say RISE, R-I-S-E?
Yeah, yep, exactly.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Thank you. Also, more generally about this property, have you had a chance to look at any environmental issues with the property, stormwater issues, any other environmental issues? You know, used to be a commercial site. Has anything come to your attention? Have you had a chance?
We probably haven't delved that deep, but Michael, anything in terms of your research?
No, other than the general area has been built without issue. Dave Remick is with us. Dave may have some background on it, but at this point, I think we've looked at a phase 1 that suggests that there are no material concerns. Obviously, we'll do geotech to determine soil quality for construction, and also, if necessary, a phase 2 to determine if we have any contamination issues.
Yeah, with the work that we did for the Edina Flats planning and design, both of the buildings along Kellogg and this site, there was environmental work, and for this site there were no issues that were discovered.
And I assume if you go to development plans, then you'll look at whether you're displacing water on the neighboring properties. That's just required.
Standard. Yeah. Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Wanted to talk about parking for a moment, and that is 1-to-1 in your mind? Is 1-to-1 enough? Like, I can envision, we talked about this could being workforce housing, and I can envision 2 workers living in a unit. So would 1-to-1 parking be sufficient?
For this type of housing, yes. If there's guest parking, they may need to utilize street parking. And it's odd. I'm just going to use Minneapolis for example. Minneapolis's maximum parking requirement is 1-for-1. In other words, you can't park more than 1-for-1. You have to get a variance to go above it. We've seen parking requirements drop over the decade. It used to be 1.5. Now I use 1. Some projects I'm going down to 0.5. This feels about the right amount. Every unit has a parking space to work with. If I go above that, then I start losing units, and thus that starts going back against affordability. So this seems to be a good balance that every unit has a stall, but it's not overparked, which again kills how to make a project work, nor is it underparked, because we did not want to go below 1-for-1 to make sure that each unit provided a stall of parking as part of the project.
You're on mute, Ian.
Thank you, Mr. Doles. This is a little bit of, and thank you for letting me know I was on mute. This is a slightly afield from land use, but who do you think will be the tenants? Could it be a mix? I mean, and in particular, I'm wondering, will families, will people, sending kids to school be buyers, or?
You're going to have, I just be upfront with you, you're going to have a crush of interest. You will be overwhelmed with demand for this. What you hope will happen is that, and it was one of the commissioners mentioned this, it is going to be your teachers' aides, your firefighters, your receptionists at the school district, your nurses' aides that work in Edina. That's the hope that we require in the young families that are associated with those positions, is who we hope will occupy this building, because that's really what the goal is to provide ownership opportunities for that level of employment. Because that, you've read the articles about the missing middle. This is what's starting to address. There's very low housing affordability, and there's expensive housing, but people in that middle bracket, it's really tough. And that's why you see these brutal housing wars going on here, where housing in the 250, 350 range, multiple bids, and that's that missing middle. So that's what we're hoping to satisfy. But it's that group of families and that group of employment that really what we hope this serves and provides that opportunity for.
And I kind of see it as a low cost opportunity to get your kids in the Edina schools.
That's part of, no, you're right. That's part of what's going to accrue with this. That's what I'm saying. There's going to be a crush of interest. So what's going to be important is working out how the units are advertised and placed, because literally you could inside sell all these tomorrow and have a waiting list, and that's not what we want to do. We want to make sure there's exposure, and this is where we work with the Edina Housing Foundation. They may request, and they may, let's say, underwrite the mortgage and say, can we do it first to Edina residents and then make that available and then work out from there. That's what's got to be developed in this process. So we try to get the type of people that need this type of housing the most, and that's that group I just mentioned.
You. I guess I have one final question, and it may be better directed at Carrie, and that is, as part of doing our comprehensive plan, Edina, like all cities, make commitments to Metropolitan Council regarding affordable housing. Obviously, my experience with Edina is that we are doing affordable housing because we think it's an important thing for the community. But we also do make these numeric commitments, and they, and people bring them up. Will this count towards Edina's numeric commitment for the 2030 comprehensive plan?
Yes, it would. If this meets the affordable housing policy and all these units qualify, it would go toward our affordable housing goals. I might add that, as we go through this, there needs to be a race and equity element in terms of the marketing and all of that. I just wanted to put that out there, that we need to be mindful of that as well.
Mentioning that. And that concludes my questions and comments. I appreciate it. Thank you for bringing it forward and the work you've done to date. Any other commissioners? Final round? Ring the bell. I can tell who was in college most recently.
But commissioners, thank you for encouragement and for your comments. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're grateful to you.
Thank you. Well, good luck. Good luck. We look forward to seeing you again. So that takes
Thank
us
you.
to the next item on our agenda, which is chair and member comments. My cousin had her. I have a few comments, but one of my cousin had her birthday today, and her dad, my uncle, and she just retired from being a college teacher. So we were talking about all these college things that are going to happen again that haven't happened for a year or two. So I've got that on my mind. So I think we're looking forward to some. It's going to be soon when the pandemic is over. It's going to be back to the future. But chair and member comments. Do we have any members with comments? Commissioner Bennett.
Yeah. Speaking about making this about myself, right? So it's Engineers Week this week, E-Week. So hopefully you're supporting your STEM pals and kids, and that alone just gets me thinking about, how we infuse that into planning and policy. And so much of what I would say, my passion is outside of my job is, really helping make it down just the best place it can be. And a lot of it really revolves around our infrastructure. It's the places where we meet as a community. And so some of my involvement, has gotten me some cool experience where working alongside people thinking of the future a lot and talking. And it just reminds me of all the good work we're doing as a commission, focusing on the future, right? Instead of dwelling on the past. And I guess one hopeful but practical remark that came up recently, and it seemed to strike me tonight too, is there's not just going to ever be this light switch that goes off that just changes the way we do things overnight. So autonomous vehicles, people walking more than driving, all of these changes, it kind of like an innovation happens, but we're still using the traditional methods of things. So yes, there's going to be surface parking here, but this is a diverse, affordable, housing option that's being proposed. And so it's, one step forward, one's kind of back, but okay. So it's nice to just think, as long as we're still moving in the right direction, it's going to be healthy to have a community, where we have surface parking lots still, but that's okay, because it's going to change, and we shouldn't expect that change to happen overnight. Doesn't mean we shouldn't try to make that change happen quicker, but you're just going to see that. So I don't know. These are things on my mind, and I just wanted to ramble. So thank you.
It's very good. It's some Commissioner Bennett is exposed to a lot of really interesting things, and through his job, and but not just the day job. I mean, I think you're on one or two kind of commissions or committees or groups that are kind of more long range planning, as opposed to just, Jimmy, show up today and do your job. It might be interesting at some point to hear about some of those experiences that you're getting exposed to. I think several of us would find it interesting. Do other commissioners have any comments? Okay, Chair, I have two comments. One is to follow up a comment from last week, and one is to introduce a new topic for your consideration and feedback. First of all, from our last meeting, I talked about how our next meeting, I believe, will be our annual meeting, and that includes election of officers, and it includes going over bylaws. And I talked about how the city's changing bylaws and going to have processes. Well, that's changed a lot since we brought it up. So, Carrie, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the city is going to be not requiring bylaws for boards and commissions, or not requiring processes. So that allows us, theoretically, at the very least, that allows us to paint with a much broader canvas, or a much broader palette, I suppose would be the more appropriate phrase. In other words, when nothing would be required of us. So now we have the opportunity to put in our bylaws, or our whatever we want to call it, how we're, kind of the rules by which we can conduct the planning commission, what we think is appropriate. There are like three paths forward. Of course, you can just get rid of everything, or we could keep roughly what we have, or we could make material changes. And I'll just toss it out there. There's no good answer, and you can comment tonight or comment next time. Carrie and I are going to send out something we've drafted, which looks substantially like what we've had up to date. We're making one or two changes, mostly regarding social media, because social media is just a new way of communicating. We've had, and a lot of us are getting much more active on social media than people were when the bylaws were created. We've had ex parte communication rules regarding, for several years regarding, don't go and have just a conversation with one person while a matter's before us. Don't go talk to the developer. Don't go talk to the neighbor and discuss the matter. Of course, you can, if someone approaches you, you can listen. But bringing that up to date, it feels appropriate to add social media as a manner of communication regarding matters before us. So we're going to bring some language for your consideration and feedback regarding social media. And again, nothing's required. If we decide to have nothing, we can take out ex parte communication. We can take out, we could have, we can make it open if we think that's appropriate. We could make it open regarding social media. But we're going to bring something forward for your review to consider. Should we have guidelines regarding use of social media to discuss matters that are before the Planning Commission? But as I mentioned, to just conclude, the conversation is probably more wide open than I thought it was 2 weeks ago because of these changes in procedure on the city's part. I see Kerry shaking his head. So I don't know. I'll pause there for just one moment, see if anyone wants to comment now. Commissioner Berube?
Yeah, would you just clarify what you just, are you just saying that, does the city now say we don't need any bylaws? And if we choose to have bylaws, we can just make them up ourselves? Is that what you just said?
It is, but I'm going to ask Kerry to confirm.
Sure. So yes, the council has decided that the commissions are not going to have bylaws. So it's not just planning commissions, it's all commissions. This really takes us back to, well, when I started here, no commissions had bylaws. But the planning commission, we thought was a good idea to do that. So there was a working group of commissioners, I think there were 4 or 5 of them, that got together and drafted essentially what we have today. So our set of bylaws have always looked different from other commissions. Other commissions were very standardized, but because of the special nature of the Planning Commission and the issues that we deal with, we had that kind of different set. So there's a lot of really good stuff in there. So as Ian mentioned, we may not call them bylaws, it could be procedures, policies, but a lot of the makeup of our current bylaws would be within that document, with the new social media type language. So that's kind of where we're at.
Carrie, can you speak to what the council was thinking when they said we don't need any bylaws or regulations?
I was not part of those conversations. Like Ian mentioned 2 weeks ago, I thought we were going to be updating our bylaws as part of the annual meeting. So I don't know the detail, what went into that decision.
I think that'd be interesting because it's hard to imagine the rationale. I think we need some guidelines.
I agree. And our bylaws were very well done by members of the Planning Commission all those years ago. I don't want to lose those, so I'd like to keep them. We'll just call them something different. And so administration is aware of, we've always had this unique set of guidelines, policies, bylaws, and they're supportive of what we're doing. So I think we can move forward in that regard.
Commissioner Strauss, Kerry.
Yeah, Carrie, maybe is this would this be a matter for our work session coming up with the city council? Because I think with Sheila and myself, I'm sort of, why not have bylaws? So, and I would be curious to see what the reason was saying, well, you don't need them. I mean, that would
Yeah,
that would be an interesting discussion to me. And I wouldn't bring it up, but I was just wondering if that's likely to be something we could address in that March session.
oh, in terms of the training, I'm not sure if that would be well, it could be a question for the moderator of that to discuss. I know and I'll find out a little bit more for our next meeting what went into that decision. I think they're putting things, bylaw type things right into the city code that pertains to all commissions. That may be part of it, but I still believe, aside from that, our current bylaws, there's so many unique things in there that we don't want to lose sight of those.
Yeah, I think the why question is a good question. Our meeting with the council is going to be a training session on land use type things, and so I just think that the minutes we have with an outside consultant, the minutes we have for that are so precious. I think if people want to have deeper conversation with council members, they ought to just reach out separately instead of using those precious minutes at that meeting for this issue. I mean, we have our scope, and we'll just address our scope, and that'd be my recommendation, my thoughts. Any further conversation about bylaws or operating procedures? I had one new thing I wanted to ask your feedback on. Okay, new matter. In past life, I was general counsel for public companies. I worked with boards, and I worked with some very good board members, very well regarded, and very, they took it seriously. And one of the things they instituted, a couple of the board members that I worked with were big on, was what they call like a board annual review. And it's something that I've been playing around with in my head, and I think could be of value with the Planning Commission on a limited basis. And so I wanted to toss that out there if there's any value. And what I'm thinking of, just as a proposal for discussion, is 3 questions. And I'm thinking that we could handle this anonymously. My preference actually would be anonymously, or I could talk to each of you individually, or or we could send something out and everybody can email it back non-anonymously. And I have to work out the anonymously. But here are the 3 questions that I have in mind. What is one thing you'd like us to do this year? What is one thing you thought we did last year that you thought was good and you'd like us to do more of that? I'm actually borrowing language that was drilled into my head maybe 10 or 15 years ago. More of that. That was good. Let's do more of that. And then the third question is, what's one thing that you'd like us to do better? And we don't have to do this at all. We're all volunteers. I think we're all working pretty functionally. I also think these are the kind of things you don't wait until you're not functional to start. that when you're functional is like a good time to do it. You don't wait for the problems, but just what I'm thinking. Just want to toss it out there, see if people we don't need to do it. We're volunteers. But just thought I'd toss it out there and get feedback, yay, nay, sort of.
I'm a fan of something. I think what we're coming off the heels of, and speaking about the future, the decennial update to the comprehensive plan, we're thinking forward, planning forward, and now we're kind of sitting back. And I think that, you know, that nature of being idle isn't good. So anything to just keep us focused on improvement is good. And I think doing nothing isn't the right answer. So whatever you'd propose, I'd be willing to experiment and then, you know, and check it out a year from now if that didn't work. Something new. Go at it.
Anyone else? I like the word experiment. I mean, anyone else? Lou?
Yeah, when you first mentioned it, my hackles went up, and I'm like, oh God, I don't want to do this. But when you mentioned the 3 questions, I thought they were really good questions. So actually, I think it's actually a great idea.
And Ian, you said it was going to be tied to our compensation this year? I like it.
Lou thought it was a review for himself.
I think, you know, any kind of communication in general is better, right? You know, and it gets us thinking about things that, you know, that's all worthwhile. I'd be curious though, so we provide the feedback, you know, the answers to the 3 questions, let's say, and what happens to it? Like we send it to you, Ian, and then do you consolidate and send back, and then what? I mean, so I think it's only worthwhile if we kind of do something with it, right? I mean, I suppose the thinking about it is beneficial, but what would you expect to do with that when you get that?
Well, that's a great question. Like the question you asked earlier about process 2 regarding something this evening. So consolidate and send back, absolutely. I'd like to have some kind of discussion. I'm not sure how and when. Perhaps April, at a April work session, or we could have it at this time. We could have it as part of our regular meeting also, you know, kind of during the Sharon member comments section of a future meeting. I'm kind of open to that. Any suggestions, Lou? You have a thought?
Yeah, it would almost seem that it would be good input right before for us to discuss it right before, you know, we start working on next year's work plan.
Well, I agree, particularly, but I'd also like to discuss it earlier than that, particularly so if there's things that people say, you know, I'd like to see us improve in this, that I'd like to talk about earlier.
I think the other thing that would be helpful is like when you're asking a question of what do we do well, is the context like as a group, how do we communicate well? Or is it what do we do well as far as moving forward on the work plan? You know, or what can we do better? Is it some people not talking so much and other people talking more? Or is it we need to have more affordable housing? So I think it's really important to understand, you know, what, I guess that's where I was kind of going with what are you going to do with that? Right?
Okay. So it's functioning as a group. It's how we function, particularly what you'd like to see better and what, hey, that's good. Let's do more of that. That's a great model kind of stuff. One thing you'd like to see happen this year is more, it could be that, or more towards the work plan. Does that make sense?
So kind of either work plan or communicating as a group.
Yeah, or working as a group in any manner, or as a planning commission. Now, kind of 2 ground rules. One is feel free to do that differently. You know, if you feel that, hey, more of this, you want to be more topical as opposed to how we do our jobs, that's fine. That's fine. You know, and 2, I'd like you to limit it to one thing so we can share it. I don't, try not to, just limit it to one thing. We'll have later opportunities to get to discuss like work plan in more detail. And I don't think that we can digest like 19 things that we need to do better, or so those are just the only two ground rules. Feel free, I'm thinking that the first two items in particular are kind of more how the planning commission works type questions. Hey, this was good, do more of that, or this is something I'd like to see us do more of or do better on. I'm thinking that'd be more, how the planning commission functions, whether it's communication or something else, how we conduct meetings or anything, how we deal with anything you think is good. And then what you'd like to see us do more of can be either, how the planning commission operates or a work plan or subject matter area. But again, everybody on here, if we're doing annual reviews, everybody on here gets a really good annual review. So, and we are volunteers, so feel free to what you think is appropriate if we go down this path. Going back to Jimmy's word, it says this is an experiment. Hopefully it's helpful. What do people think about anonymity or format? I think there's, what do you think? Anonymity or non-anonymity?
I think it depends on whether you're going to gather from everybody answers to 3 questions, consolidate them, and send them back out. Then anonymity is fine. And maybe there'll be some things people say that they wouldn't say if they were identified, right? However, if you're expecting a discussion, then don't bother with the anonymity.
We'll find out anyways.
I mean, yeah. I mean, and I would think it's going to be most useful if you assume we're going to discuss it.
I assume we're going to discuss it.
I think if you're going to discuss it, then, you can't really do anonymity.
Carrie, what do you think? Personally, I like candor. So whatever, if people can be candid and not be anonymous, that's great. Carrie, what do you think? Is there a value in an anonymity? This goes in a public record, I suppose.
Well, I could just share from experience. When you have a group of 9 people and you're submitting comments, the people in that group are generally going to know who made those comments.
Okay. Well, that makes it easier if we do non-anonymous. That makes it easier to do it. Is everyone okay with that? Another way to do it is I could communicate with each of you individually. We could just have a quick discussion. That's the way I've seen a lot of boards do it. They don't just send out a form and have it emailed back. I mean, the chair talks to each member, and that's always obviously a longer conversation. The ones I've dealt with. Would you like to do that, or you want me to send a form out, or just an email?
I think if we're going to discuss it later, I wouldn't bother in you discussing it first to just discuss it again.
Yeah. You got the questions. I mean, do you want me? I could send you an email as a reminder, and you can just reply. Okay, everybody okay with that? Give it a shot. Thank you. I hope it's good. If it's not, it's a 1-year thing. That's chair comments. Staff comments is the next item on the agenda.
Nothing else for me tonight. We didn't have, in fact, I didn't even attend the last city council meeting. There was no planning commission items on that agenda. So nothing for me tonight.
Well, that takes us to our 9th and final Roman numeral on tonight's agenda, which is adjournment.
I move to adjourn.
I second.
Ms. Olson, could you do a roll vote if you're here?
I am. Thank you. Commissioner Strauss,
Aye.
Commissioner Agnew,
Aye.
Commissioner Berube,
Aye.
Commissioner Olson,
Oh, I'm sorry. Joanne did send me a note. She had to check out about 10 minutes ago.
okay, my apologies. Commissioner Miranda,
Aye.
Commissioner Bennett, Chair Nemrov.
Aye. And thank you, everyone. We had several matters tonight. Thank you.